What's up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. On a recent visit to the Netherlands, I came across an interesting public aquarium of sorts. It is a privately owned aquarium called Aquazoo, and I've never seen anything quite like it. Let's check it out. How to describe this place? Aquazoo looks like equal parts public aquarium and an underground clubhouse. When it was suggested to the group that I was traveling with, nobody really knew what to expect. For example, we would be just making small talk with some of the local hobbyists and professionals. And we said that we're going to be going to this small public aquarium. And they looked really confused as to what we were even talking about. Almost like there's no public aquarium like that. This didn't just happen once or twice. It was like this recurring theme. So, in my mind, I was prepared for this place to be completely whack. Luckily, Aquazoo was a pleasant surprise. When we arrived at the building, it's not immediately obvious that there is a public aquarium here at all. It just looks like a building in a business complex. We made our way down to the basement level, and there it was. It is really this tiny public aquarium display with literally dozens of tanks, both freshwater and saltwater. But the whole thing has this clubhouse cafe feel to it, as if it was a private hangout. There's this service counter that has drinks and food, but all this really cool seating for groups surrounded by these aquarium exhibits. What a cool place to hang out. One thing that struck me right away was how incredibly clean the tanks were. Every tank was very polished looking, and it was especially evident in the freshwater tanks because the planted aquascapes looked diligently pruned and garden like. I then learned that this public aquarium is maintained by volunteer hobbyists, which kind of makes a lot of sense. The exhibits have a hobbyist feel to them. Typically, when I go to a public aquarium, it's going for a much more natural look, something that you might actually see underwater in the wild. But I think that hobbyists have a slightly different aesthetic, more of like an art installation. Honestly, I have been to many lower tier public aquariums where I thought hobbyists could do a better job with those exhibits, but that was purely theoretical. This was the first time that I'm seeing something like this because Aquazoo is the literal manifestation of that. A public aquarium that is all hobbyist. So that's the general background of what I'm seeing, but there are a few standout tanks that I wanted to talk about. The first I will mention is this soft coral reef tank. For decades now, the in aesthetic in the hobby has been either mixed reefs or an SPS dominated reef. Very rarely do you see large soft coral only aquariums, so it was really refreshing to see a display like this. I think it also makes sense in a public aquarium because these corals tend to be a lot more forgiving than, say, I don't know, an acropora dominated reef that we all know can go sideways in a hurry. A close second is probably this giant freshwater puffer tank. I've never really kept pufferfish, but I've always thought that they have such great personality. And coming from saltwater, you would think that I would gravitate more towards saltwater puffers because there are so many. But the novelty of a giant freshwater puffer, I think, is super cool. It's something that I don't typically expect to see, like this giant puffer that looks like it should be in an ocean, and it's surrounded by like tiny tetras and stuff. The third, I like paludariums. Never had one, but I do like them. The one that they have here at Aquazoo is an archerfish display. I always thought archerfish were cool because they are one of the few fish that interact with the terrestrial layer of a paludarium. You can often find paludariums that feature something like an aquatic lizard or something that makes use of both the planted section as well as the aquatic section, but it's not that often that you see a fish in a paludarium that makes use of the entire system. The archerfish don't crawl out of the water or anything like that, but they do snipe insects that are on leaves and stuff like that in that canopy layer. What does crawl out of the water is this mud skipper, which, again, I think is a cool addition to this display. The fourth tank that was super interesting is this river tank. It's probably something that I would get bored of, but I do appreciate the engineering that goes into even making this. They created a fast-flowing river using Tunza power heads on one end of the tank and shooting the water towards a false wall at the other end. The water then goes to this perforated wall and then makes its way back to the opposite end through a hidden channel under the aquascape. Like I said, cool bit of engineering. You don't see too many river tanks. The fifth and final tank is an African freshwater tank. I am sure that there are more rare and interesting freshwater fish here, but I don't know what they are. I don't know what I'm looking at when it comes to the freshwater side. I do, however, know about Congo tetras, and ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted a tank dominated by Congo tetras. Never owned one ever before. Back in the 90s, when I kept freshwater, they were like $5, and I thought that was so expensive for a fish. And it probably was for like a 10-year-old kid or however old I was at the time. To this day, the Congo tetra tank has eluded me. So, what is it about Congo tetras? I love the iridescent color of these fish. I love the shape of their tails. And it might just be purely in my head, but I think they just behave differently than Amazonian fish. Again, might be my imagination, but they just looked super different to me. Anyway, guys, that does it from here. Have you guys ever seen a public aquarium quite like this?